Hi.
Hey, that worked, huh?
Wow. You look different. You have a beard.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of being so long in quarantine. You get to experiment with beard
with
growth.
with a different style. Fantastic,
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you
yeah.
so much. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation for this live interviews, series of live interviews. I was just explaining to everybody who's just first time visiting my channel and see the live interviews. Live interviews. It's a 5 question width. It's a 5 predetermined question to each individual photographer or videographer, my guest. They are the same. And then I choose 1 or 2 questions from the audience, from the guys, from you guys, from the audience, and I actually have I've, already 2 questions because I have announced I mean, this series, and then I ask the question. I ask the people to ask you a question. So I have 2, 1. But if someone now live will post some question which is much more interesting and much more better, I will switch the questions to this one. But anyway, I already have two questions for you. And again, thank you so much for joining me. And it's nice to see you again. A little bit different, but nevertheless, great to see you.
Yeah, man. Definitely good to see you too.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much. So before we start, let me introduce, I mean, my audience. Let me introduce to you my today's guest, an amazing landscape travel and cityscape photographer, Elia Locardi. His work is recognized by many for his unique style of combining in cameras and post-processing techniques for time-blending moments in a single image. His work featured in Professional Photography Magazine, CNET, Wacom, SmagMag Films, Adobe Fujifilm, and F-Stopper. The list of company who is partnering with is quite impressive and include brands like Fujifilm, Wacom, SmagMag, Think Tank Photo, Really Right Stuff, and many others. But he is not only an established photographer, but also a public speaker and has been invited to speak at so many of the largest photography events and stages around the world, like Photokina, Gulf Photo Plus Export, and others. And moreover, he is also a fantastic educator who released several brilliant tutorials in a series of photographing the world. And now he even made to a show presenter in his new series called Moments in Time, and already released for a second season. And for me personally, he is a true ambassador of time blending photography. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elia Locardi.
Thanks, everybody. Man, that I sound so lame in that description. I'm gonna have to give people a short one.
Really?
It is the most
Oh,
yeah, it's the most awkward thing in the world when somebody starts describing you in a, third person written perspective when you're talking to them.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry for that, but yeah.
Oh no, no, I'm not asking you to apologize. It's just really funny. It's like being announced before you do one of those talks. Usually
Yeah,
somebody's like,
yeah,
blah,
exactly.
blah, blah, he's blah, blah, blah. And then you go out on stage and here he is. But like just one on one, it's funny.
Yeah, but we can you can put your hands on before on your
Right.
camera,
I think I'm just for the next one, I'm just gonna say it's like here's Elia Locardi. He has a much bigger beard than last time, and that's it.
yes, exactly. And I will having someone as well or something. I don't know to match your style or something. But anyway, it's all true, and I mean it's even shorter than people know you, and probably you have much more ambassadorial like awards and stuff like that. So it's just oh, Eli having a problem with connecting. I use
Oh,
it's okay.
yeah, we've been having it's fine. It kind of drops out every once in a while for no reason. Yeah.
Okay, no problem, no problem, no problem. So anyway, yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much for joining my channel, my series of interviews.
Hmm.
And if you are ready, we can start. We can start with the first question.
Sure, let's do it.
Absolutely, fantastic. Thank you so much. So my first question is, how do you came to photography, and why do you choose your particular style of shooting, editing, and techniques? And what drew you to this? Or why not, for example, I don't know, fashion or sport or macro photography? Why particularly uh, this style and this technique?
Well, kind of have to talk about 12 years ago when I really started to get into this because I've been doing now this style of photography for 10 years. The reason that I'm doing this style of photography is because I never intended it for a job. I never intended it to be a job. It was just something that I wanted to do. So when I got into photography, it was about doing something that I wanted to do with my life rather than something that I had to do. And then slowly over time, I think you naturally fall into the category that you're going to be. But before 2010, and especially before 2012, 2013, we had Flickr, and that was really the only, it's not even social media, right? It's sharing photos and kind of commenting on them. But we didn't really have a lot of examples of what we wanted to be. We didn't have Instagram, we didn't have all of these things. So it was kind of a cool opportunity to invent yourself and not be compared to something, because the pros of that is you can be completely unique, but the cons is there's no working model. We can't say we're going to simulate this style, this style, this style, because we can't really find it at that point.
Yeah.
You know, we might have magazines, we might be looking on Flickr or whatever Google could produce, but we weren't inundated with material all the time. So my idea was to take pretty much 10 years of post-production and animation, and I don't know, that at that time, still like 15 years of using Photoshop, and sort of reverse engineer the process. I was like, well, I learned photography, but can I just have fun digitally? So first I'm like, oh, I'm going to change the sky. I'm going to do all this kind of stuff. And I realized that that kind of sucks when you have to do it to a bunch of photos. So I really started getting into the in-camera stuff
Exactly.
and just inventing my own processing style, because again, there was nowhere really to learn. I just kind of based on my knowledge. And then Adobe Lightroom came out and we started using Lightroom, and then we had raw processing. Raw processing got better, so we started moving into that, and then raw processing came to mobile devices, and I was like, wow, this is great. We could do most of the work. And honestly, for the raw processing and blending workflow, the reason that I got into it is because we're able to. I was going back through a lot of my files, like from the D700 or earlier cameras before 2012, 2013. I was like, man, you know, with these new tools, we can go back and there's going to be dynamic range, but there's nothing in those shadows. I mean, it's amazing what we can do now. And since I never wanted it to be a job, we really wanted to travel. We made too much of our lives about, you know, working, and we had gone through a rough patch where we lost our house in the financial crisis. We had really, really dark times, and we decided that it would be nice to actually take a vacation. It's been 10 years since we took a vacation. And that's sort of how the whole thing started.
Yeah.
We decided to go away for a little while and find inspiration. And then we decided that that was something we wanted to do. And over the years, it just started developing into a business. But it was never pressured on, in the beginning, it was never pressured on, this is how we're going to be successful. This is how we're going to make money. It was, this is what we want to do. And this is how we want to keep doing it.
At any point, did you think, okay, can we, you know, can we shoot something else? I mean, not, you know, unmoving objects like landscapes and cityscape, but more like, you know, lifestyle or fashion or anything which is involve, you know, people or posing or portrait.
Well, that's a more recent thing. I had no interest in shooting people. In 2013, I worked with a film director, a friend of mine, Tim Gorski, on a film, How I Became an Elephant. So I was just photographing elephants in Thailand for him. And that kind of led me on a path of environmentalism and animal rights, animal welfare. So I started doing some work in that realm just to support the causes. But I never really wanted to do fashion photography because I felt like if that would be a job to me, you know what I mean? I have at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
point, it's like,
yeah.
I don't want clients, I don't want anything. And it's not until recently in the last few years where I started taking on bigger jobs for landscape, cityscape, or travel, where I have a whole body of images to collect. Even that was something that I was like, you know, I can get back into it this way. Fashion photography is really interesting. For the second season, Moments in Time, the first season's out on YouTube right now, and that visits Jan Gonzalez, who's very inspiring and very good friend of mine, old friend of mine. And the way that he does things, I'm just like, you know, I want to do this. I want to be able to make light look the way that you make it, and have this, you know, in your mind, because this is what he's doing. Most of it is the conceptual part. He's like building these sets, building these ideas in his head, and then he spends
Yeah.
months putting them together. And I'm like, you know, that to me, I can definitely get into that. And then a third or fourth episode, I'm not sure which one it's going to be yet. we're in Cambodia and we start doing environmental portraiture and environmental stuff with the monks inside of Angkor Wat and Bayon temples. And man, like we're watching the light play on the folds of the robes and all this. I'm like, man, okay, now I think I could do this. This is fun. You know, this is fun. This is a exercise in composition, and honestly, taking the camera off the tripod, which is great. So I don't think I'll ever build a studio and do that, but I think that it's something that I appreciate. I could see myself doing for fun. And the other realm that I like wildlife photography because I love nature. You know, I like being on safari. I think it's cool, but it's also really weird when there's 65 safari jeeps surrounding a cheetah that just wants to take a poop, you know, and in the cheetah's face, you're like, yeah, I don't feel good about this. It's very invasive. But there are things that I'd like to be doing that involve either the environmentalism or animal welfare, is just telling the stories, but actually going into the nature and working with the people that are doing it right, or talking a little bit more about conservation. And part of the plan, I mean, we all had plans. Now we don't really, except to make plans later. But I was planning on going back to Tanzania and highlighting how they are conservative based with their tourism and how they're really trying to preserve their culture, heritage, and the relationship with animals. So that's sort of on the horizon for another time. But you know, I can't. The other thing is, I mean, I know I'm making this question so much more complicated. I can't really define the type of photography that I do because I'm not really a landscape photographer. I can't say travel. I do some people, some stuff. It's more just what I feel represents the location or thing that I'm trying to photograph. And that's really it. I'm just trying to give it some life that it either didn't have before or sort of hasn't been conceived. So I'm building a set in my head with light, but I'm also trying to find something that is representative or iconic and that lives in a scene when you look at it. So you walk up to it and you feel like it's deep. You can walk into it or you feel something from it. And that can be cities, that can be landscapes, basically anything that you see that's just inspiring. That's what I'm trying to photograph.
I totally understand. And thank you for this, you know, very, you know, big answer to a question. But I totally understand that. Yeah, there's a certain moments which you can't describe, and I'm really glad that you are, you know, taking opportunities to work in maybe in just a different environment, different genre as well. You know, we're thinking about moving to a different genre. It'll be very interesting to see what you come up with, and I think it will be, you know, different to any other photographers out there who's doing the similar stuff. But anyway, thank you so much for answering that. So let's move to a second one. So, what is your current favorite equipment which you can't live without? I mean, it's a little bit technical, but still, you know, I can.
It's a dumb answer, but honestly, it's Bluetooth headphones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and also Google Maps, because the first time I visited Tokyo, I didn't have Google Maps on a device or anything, and there were no roaming plans or anything like that to get it. So it was just random people or my people who were running the hotel that I was staying at, drawing and circling things on the Japanese/English map, and I'm trying to figure out the subway system. So I miss that in a way, but now I don't feel a lot of questions you get are like, do you feel nervous? Do you feel like you're going to get lost? It's like, no, I don't, because I can open Uber anywhere in almost anywhere in the world now, or my taxi, and I can just get myself lost, and I know that I'll find my way back. So it opens up the world and also gives you sort of confidence in your pocket, because the camera gear changes. You know, I can't say that, you know, I love the Fujifilm GFX 100. It's an amazing camera. You know, it's medium format, it's 100 megapixel, it's got IBIS. I love the camera, but I know there's going to be a new one that comes out. I've never really fallen in love so much with the camera that I'm like, this is it. You know, this is the best camera, best lens. It's just kind of what you have to get the job done. But I will never, I mean, if I ever packed to leave and I forgot my headphones, I'd be devastated. I'd be like, what am I going to do on the airplane? What am I going to do calls? You know what I mean? It's a weird thing, but it's true.
Was it Apple Pro? I mean, sorry, the headphones you have, is it Pro?
The AirPods Pro.
AirPods Pro. Okay.
I think so Apple products are funny for us though, because I always I got the watch when it had the cellular function where I can just take calls without a cell phone. And I was like, I don't need a watch. I can get the time on my phone. And then after a couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, I can see why this is useful. And then, and Naomi's like, oh, I don't know. I would never use one of those. And I'm like, oh, no, let's get you one. And 2 weeks later, she's like, oh, man, I don't know how. Same things when the AirPods came out. Now I think she uses hers more than I do. And especially having a 1-year-old at home, like you can still
Yeah,
access
yeah, yeah,
and voice
totally
control
understand.
and make calls and everything when you don't have any hands free. So yeah, it's essential.
Wow, yeah, totally understand, totally understand. Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, you use no equipment better than you have right now, and especially the one which you have right now in your use. So, yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So let's move to a third one. If not photography, then what?
I think that my dream is to just travel without any camera gear,
Great.
without 20 kilos on my back. I think that's like our dream life is just step on an airplane with nothing. That would be my dream. And I think we just do that. Just travel just to travel and not have an agenda for photography. I know it sounds funny, but this, 10, 11 years carrying so much weight and always being concerned about gear on and off planes and in transport, that's the worst is getting from A to B, not in the experience, but just gear management. And that's the whole,
Mm.
that becomes the headache and heartache of travel. So I think I just take Naomi and I would just take our daughter and just travel. I think that would be the next phase of my life is to travel more, enjoy the world, meet people, tell stories, maybe write, and probably not or try not to take pictures. I know it's
Yeah.
impossible. It's an
So,
impossible thing.
so Elia Locardi, world traveler. That's it. Next time I will
I
present you
would just
just a world traveler.
yeah, yeah, you'll just find me at like so, be at a pub talking to somebody, and that's
Yeah.
that's the dream.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely great. So let's move to our fourth question. What is your main source of inspiration? Who or what? It could be a person, or it could be, I don't know, website or anything, like museums or stuff like that. So who or what
Um,
is your main source of inspiration?
well, if you want to see the people that I'm inspired by, you watch Photographing the World, and that's going to be most of the people, almost all of the people on that show are good friends of mine, people that I've met, people that I know, and people that have inspired me in some way, and people that I hope inspire you in a way too. That's my hope. But my inspiration comes sort of randomly, but I get most inspiration when I'm around people. So if I'm doing a lot of talks and I'm meeting a lot of people, either people who are coming to the conference or the talks, or the people that are organizing it, or the companies I'm working for. That's where I get most of my inspiration is just talking to people, meeting people, bouncing off ideas, and just kind of learning about whether it's a culture, whether it's a location, or whether it's just the nuances of business or marketing or all of these things that make companies work, that make the world work. I start to sort of feed off that and just get a sort of synergistic thought going. It's like you just start to tell people ideas, talk about ideas, and then it evolves into something else. And then you can talk to other people about it, and you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And you just start to sort of build these ideas, and eventually they sort of come to be. But that's something that I've relied on for a long time. Now that I'm just a stay-at-home dad in Florida, um, I think my inspiration is actually coming from just being in nature. Like
Mm.
even through the lockdown, we were across the street from the beach, so we just go sit on the beach, watch the sunrise, watch the sunset, and just kind of let go of everything. Don't think about work because you can let it go for a little while. And being in one place has given me the opportunity to finally kind of do that and just relax and kind of meditate, just
Yeah.
be, which is good.
Be yourself. Yeah, totally understand. But this is great when you are inspired by other people. Yeah, as you said, the people who are surrounding you, the people who you talk to, or who organizes. I mean, who organizing your events. It's a fantastic way to to be inspired by the people, more than, for example, other people inspired by arts or works others. But when you're inspired by people, it's a great. great way to, you know, to experience the inspiration, if I may say so.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my fifth question and my final question before we jump to two questions from our audience is, I ask Eli to send 3 of his personal favorite shots of all time and just briefly say why those are his favorite. And let me just pull out those shots so for you to see them, for everybody to see. Unfortunately, only me can present them yet on Instagram. So I will, yeah, that's the first shot. And I think everybody knows this shot. So everybody see that, but we want to hear why is this particular shot is your favorite, and, you know, some story about it or something.
There are a lot of funny stories about it, but I think that now, thinking back on it, just being so long ago that I captured it, it was really my first experience with astrophotography. I didn't know how to do it before that shot, and I sort of leading up to that was testing things and teaching myself. But that shot was kind of the apex of my idea of success, because I saw so many photos of Mount Bromo before we visited. That was kind of like the everybody kind of want, you know, that was the one, like that was the best one I could think that I really wanted. And I've seen so many things like fog and sunrises and sunsets, but I never saw anything with stars or star trails, which is what I really wanted to do, with star trails. So I planned a while and wanted to go, and we only had 4 tries, 4 nights. I stayed up all night to try to get that shot. But what was interesting is we were there with friends in Yogyakarta first, and we went to Borobudur Temple, and we were in Surabaya, and I realized that when I was going to Mount Bromo in my bag, I forgot my trigger release cable, and I was like, oh man! And we're getting ready to leave, and we're looking for camera stores. Of course, nobody has one. So hard to find just a random thing like that for a Nikon camera, and then my buddy's like, you know what? Just take mine, and I'm like, oh, thanks. You know, and I mean, these are like a $2 cable, but you know, you can't do it without it. Interval timer would leave a gap of a second. So I just remember all of those things had to come into play. And then I didn't look at the files. I tested them every night to make sure that the star trails work. But if anybody who's ever done star trails and blending together, you know, night, day, moonlight, it's a big pain in the ass. You know, like there's a lot of masking and a lot of things that can go wrong. So I never tested any of that. And didn't look at the files for like 6 months. I was like, I can't even deal with this. And then 6 months later, I think I was in Budapest, and we're staying in this really cool, you know, is the Russian style buildings, like the apartments are huge, huge, and there's like frescoes and stuff. I'm like, this is amazing. So I just felt really inspired there, and just like sat and figured it out. But it was kind of like the first time that I had thought of an image for a number of years, you know, at least a few good years, and then sort of analyzed, well, if you know, there's so many things, and I can obviously tell that this is a standard vantage point. So what am I going to do to try to make this different? And that was my idea, and it ended up being a success. And I didn't even read, you know, at that time, I don't even think photo pills. No, there was no photo pills. We didn't really have any of that stuff. So I didn't even know what the moon phase was going to be. And I just got lucky that you can see the lighting there, that the moon's right behind me and off to the left. So some things I was very lucky for, and then some things I planned for, and it kind of taught me that sometimes all that patience and planning actually works. Most of the time it doesn't, but you know, sometimes. That was the first time it really worked.
This is a brilliant shot for all the things which happening around this. You know, your first, you know, star trail shot, your first, you know, astrophotography. I mean, obviously like a big, you know, astrophotography shot. You've forgotten the time release. Button release or release. Sorry.
Yeah,
so
it's
all
the
of
cable
this,
release or button release.
release, yeah, all of this,
and it was also I don't know if I can't say that it was the first one, but I mean, what we say, what's the first one that was online or on what social media, but I hadn't seen this before. So that was kind of nice to sort of bring in something new. And that was easier to do, you know, 8, 9 years ago, even 6, 7 years ago. It was easier to do because there was no Instagram. There was just Google Plus, and Facebook had just gone to public mode, you know, where there were followers and things like that. So as far as the rate of consumption for media, it was much more narrow back then. So we weren't seeing the Milky Way, we weren't seeing the Northern Lights, we weren't seeing these in volumes like we were. So back then, this was something very unique. Now it's nice. You can do, everybody can do a really good job on it. You're like, wow, that's an amazing version of that. But it's getting more and more difficult to say this is unique without getting into some blending things. But even then, we stir up controversy. Even Star Trails back then, people were like, yeah, but that's not real because, you know, it's Star Trails and it's blending. But it still was the first Star Trail shot that I saw, or at least one of them. Like I said, I can't say it's the first one because I really don't know, but it was early enough to where it was one of the few, I think.
Let's just think this is the first one. I think we will be safe to say, if somebody knows something else, you know, correct us. But for now, just let's think it's the first one. And
sure. Sure. I don't want to claim it. I don't want to claim it because I know I have to be wrong. But the next image illustrates the same point, but in a different way.
For better, you know, for better lack of not knowing that it's going to be if it's not first or not, we just say it's first, but still, you know, we have like first in brackets. So if somebody say, yeah, it's not first, I done it first. Okay, let's see what you done, what he did or she did. So moving to a second image, there's 3 of them. Moving to a second image is this one, I believe so. It was beautiful. Beautiful image of this temple. So.
Tiger's Nest or Taksang Temple in Bhutan. So this image is interesting because it actually was the first blue hour shot published of Tiger's Nest. And this was another situation where, I mean, you can't fly a drone. If you go to Bhutan, please don't fly a drone. I mean, you're not supposed to. So it's very hard to get unique vantage points because you're on a path, you're on a mountain hike, you know, so you're just on this ridge line, and it's safe and everything, but there aren't really many. You can go up a little, down a little. So I was trying to think of a way that I could make this unique. And first thing I thought, I was like, oh, maybe stars or star trails, but you're in the Himalayas. I mean, it's probably not going to happen. There's fog and rain and clouds and stuff. And you can't even get accurate weather back then. It was just so funny. You just like everything said it was like -3 to 30. You're like, what?
Oh my God.
You can't even get. Yeah, it was weird. So I wanted to capture it during blue hour, but what was interesting is I didn't really talk to anybody about it. We were there for a different reason. We were filming a thing for Discovery Channel about the Tour of the Dragon that they do every year, which is the longest one-day mountain bike race in the world. They don't even stop traffic for it. It was wild just to capture that. Our last day we had free before we flew the next day, and that was our hike. So we hiked up, and we got up in the afternoon, and I just kind of set up, and I asked my guide, who's a really good friend of mine now, Yanten, I'm like, hey, can we stay up here for sunset? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, okay, cool. Do you know if the building lights up? Do we know if it lights up? And he's like, I have no idea. I'm like, well, you've never been up here? We've never been up here. No, I've never been up here for sunset. And I'm like, well, how many times have you been up here? I've taken people for, I don't know, hundreds of times. And I'm like, well, you have to know. No, nobody's ever asked to be up here that long.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, all right, well, let's stay, you know? And the same friend, Tim Gorski, the director, he's the one who invited me to work on this too. He had just had some lung surgery, so he took like hours, and he like met a pack of monkeys and like these people, and like he's very social, you know. So he comes up and he's like, wow, this is so amazing. What are we doing? And I'm like, we're just gonna stay up here for a few hours. He's like, that's cool, I can stay up here all day. And I'm like, great. So Tim's good for it, you know, Yanten's good. And then I'm like, man, you know what? This would be complete if we could just, you know, have some beers and watch the sunset. And then I'm thinking, like, there's no way. I mean, we're miles away from a town, we're miles up a mountain, you know, and I'm like, there's no shops, no restaurants, no anything. And then Yanten's like, I know a place. And I'm like, he knows a place? So he just sort of takes off down the mountain. Yeah, I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. And he didn't come back. So we wait, and you know, monks walk by an hour later, you know, just before sunset, and they're carrying the buckets. And I walked up to the monks, and everybody speaks English well there. And I'm like, hey guys, they're like, yes, do you have lights in the temple? And they just kind of look at me and like, yeah, we do have electricity. And I'm like, oh, okay. Sorry, it sounded really stupid. So we waited and shot, and it turned out really nice. You know, there was some issues with floodlights, but that's with any, you know, older building. And we're getting ready to pack up in the dark and hike down. And then Yanten comes back around the corner. And I'm like, oh, you came back to get us. And he's like, yo, I brought beer. And I'm like, what? How did you do that? So he's like, yeah, I went down, I hiked down, drove to town, drove back and hiked back up.
Oh
He's
my
like,
God.
not even winded. I'm like, you're wild. And, and so they have the go, which kind of looks like a kimono kind of style, and the top. And they just starts taking big beers out of his shirt, his go. And so then we're climbing down with all our gear in the dark after it rained, drinking malt liquor, basically. So it was a unique experience. But what's interesting is it was the first one published because I brought it back to the Tourism Council in Thimphu, and they said, we've never seen this before. We didn't even know it lit up at night. We've never
Wow.
seen it this beautiful. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So they used it for their national marketing for a few years and all of their stuff and calendars and books, all sorts of stuff. And then even the royal family saw it, and the prince, he's an amazing guy. And he's like, wow, that's beautiful. And I'm like, would you like a print? Sure. So we sent him a print for the royal palace, and it was just kind of a neat experience. And I'm like, well, I didn't really do much except for wait a few hours and drink beer to get this unique shot. So unlike the first one that took a lot of planning, preparation, and skill, this took a little bit, but again, I just waited longer. And I think that's a good lesson, is to just wait a little bit longer and see what the light does.
Yeah,
Especially with their
exactly.
sensors and night photography, you'll be surprised. You might actually use a shot that's much later in time than you would have anticipated. So it's kind of cool. I always remember that. Just the blue hour was different enough.
Yeah, this is a unique experience, and thank you for the story. This is amazing, and also a little bit surprising that nobody else before shot this iconic view of Bhutan, and with this.
No, and I've been back a few times, and it's funny because we ran into some people that first time, and we ran into the same people a couple of years later, that second time. So it's a very magical place. And the third time I went, I think was the third time with Benjamin Von Wong, and we were working on something together. And I even met the Queen Mother that time.
Wow.
And she was great. And it was amazing. Like I'm dressed up as like a steampunk explorer, and we have all these lights set up. And I was a weird project that we never published, where I was like, I want to do something that makes me uncomfortable, and Ben had to do something that made him uncomfortable. So I was the model. And Yanten and everybody else, like, they're running around like crazy. They're going, I think the royal family's here. Like, they're trying to, look like they're in reverence, and then Yanten's like, okay, no, it's the Queen Mother. She's coming by. So like when she comes, space forward, palms out, and just bow.
Wow.
And so she walks by, and like we do that, and she looks up, and she has a camera in her hand. She's like, what are you guys waiting for? And I'm like, well, we're waiting for the golden hour. She's like, yeah, the sun sets right over there and the light comes. I'm like, are you a photographer? She's like, yeah, I love photography. And she's like, and I have to say, you look amazing. What are you guys doing? And then I spent like 15 minutes just hanging out and talking with the Queen Mother, and she's just so cool and so much fun. And I just remember Yanten's face, like he's just looking at me and was like, please don't say something stupid. Just please don't. So it's a magical place. I think that's
it is.
Yeah, it's a magical country too.
It's a fantastic story. Actually, two of them already for one picture. Wow, this is fantastic. Wow, so I think you have like amazing millions of stories all around the world, and we can hear the story about this one as well. Now, this is Japan.
So this is Fuji Yoshida, Japan, and there are a lot of stories about this one because I spent years trying to capture it. The first is the cherry blossoms in Fuji Yoshida. You can check Fuji Yoshida aside from this mountain. That's not a mountain, it's a hill. Mm-hmm. And everything would be in full bloom on the lake, full bloom everywhere else, and these are still closed completely. So one year was a mistake of just going when I thought they'd be blooming, and then they weren't. Mm-hmm. But back in, God, I just want to say it was 2011, 12, and 13 when I was really starting to get into Japan. I found this little thumbnail of this. It was so small, like a 1 inch by 1 inch, like 100 by 100 pixels, if that, of this red pagoda and Fuji in the background. And I'm like, what is this? I couldn't even tell if it was an image. So I was sending it to a bunch of my friends in Japan. And then finally, a friend of mine who lived in Fuji Yoshida, he's like, oh yeah, that's our temple. That's the temple we have in town. It's they just built it. I'm like,
Ah, I see.
oh, really? Okay, we're gonna go there. And then we found this, and it was the wrong time of the season. And then nobody was there. Nobody knew about it, and not even Japanese people at that time knew about it. And then I came back the next year and missed the cherry blossoms. And the following year, I timed it and shot like six days to get this sort of weather. And there's blending. There's a lot of other things I can talk about it, but there was nobody there. All the times that I was there shooting it, there was nobody there. It was just people hiking, and it was very serene, very beautiful. And now there could be 1,000 people on a little plastic platform trying to get
Oh.
these photos with the iPhone. So, and I was talking to my friend Yuga about this a few years ago, and he lives there. So every season he goes and takes photos, and he just shows a million people trying to take this photo. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry that like images like mine, helped destroy this place for local people. And he's like, no, 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 it was your image that did it. And I'm like, what do you mean it was your image? And then he's like, oh yeah, the mayor saw your image. It was your image that he saw and said, we can turn this into a tourist attraction. So they started using, not my image. They don't steal images that often in Japan. But they used it after seeing mine. They're like, let's make this, let's give it like a, little festival there. We'll have Wi-Fi. We'll build a platform. We'll do all these things. So I started to feel bad that this was a place that I kind of helped destroy for the locals. And then I was at what was I, Adobe Max with Kenji Yamamura, who's a friend of mine, a great guy. And I'm telling Kenji this story, and Kenji's like, no, Elia, you saved it. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, they were going to tear it down until the
Really? They
mayor saw
just
your
build it.
image. Yeah, well, it wasn't getting any attention, and they have to pay to keep it up. And apparently nobody was visiting. Locals didn't like it, and he was going to get rid of it. And then he saw my image, and he turned it into a tourist attraction, and it saved it. Now they have
Wow.
money to keep it there, to preserve it and all these other things. So the other perspective of that is that my image saved it from
Turn
just
it
being
down.
taken down.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of things that work. And for me, visually, it was the first time I could actually just put something in representation of a place or a country. So you have the mountain, the pagoda, the cherry blossoms. You have some of the three most famous sort of looking structures or natural occurrences that you have in one country, all in a single place or a single photograph.
Yeah.
So I don't think there aren't really many other places that you can stand in the world that represent a country so well. And I think that's why this area deserves to be as popular as it is. It's definitely different. I don't think I've been there over the years now just to kind of see how it's gotten, and it's pretty wild. So if you do want to shoot this and it's cherry blossom season, you kind of want to arrive for sunset and just stay there all night,
Oh my
because
God.
people are camping out now to get the sunrise.
Wow.
From all over the world too. So it's not impossible, and it's people who visit Japan usually have more of a friendly mindset. Japanese people are lovely people, so it's not a bad place to be. It's not like being some places in the world where the people are sticking arms through
Yeah,
everywhere
yeah,
they can.
yeah.
It's pleasant, but bring a snack and be there for the long haul.
Wow. It's and for me the incredible story is that it's a brand new built temple, which looks for me like 100 years old and or even more. So this is just I always thought when I looking at that particular picture, I thought that's an old temple from, I don't know, maybe 1600 or whenever, and it's just brand
Yeah.
new.
Well, that's why I'm trying to get people who have any civic works or public works and city ties in certain areas. That's the thing that I say. It's like next time you build a pagoda, think about the positioning for a photo. And
To make it,
I was
yeah.
in. Oh yeah, I mean, last time I was in the Netherlands with Albert Dross. We were photographing the tulip fields, and Marcel, who owns all the fields, he's the largest tulip grower. He's also a photographer, and I'm like, look, Marcel, next time you do this, like align them to go right into the windmills.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, okay, so we're telling like put one of red and then one of like the orange one. So
Yeah,
we can start putting our own temples in.
super useful advice for all photographers. Yeah, everybody should listen to that, and everybody should build buildings according to photographic compositional rules, not
Yeah,
architectural, not architectural.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
structural engineering isn't as
Yeah.
important as
Yeah, yeah,
visual
yeah.
engineering.
It's yeah, overrated now. Now we have to build for compositional purposes for the photographers
Exactly.
like cityscape photographers like Elia Locardi and any others. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So that was the five questions. Sorry for taking so long. I know you're holding your phone and you probably it's already tired, but I have two more questions if you're okay to answer them. That's
Sure.
from audience. Let me switch off this amazing image and let me go back to my um, to my to my camera. So the first questions come from Maxim Krotov. I think he's a Russian. I believe so. So why the Fujifilm and not other brands? I mean, yes, a bit technical, but still maybe a good question to ask. Why Fujifilm and not other brands?
There were a few things that happened at the end of 2012 and beginning of 2013. It was when Fujifilm had two cameras at that point, and they came out with a third. They had the the X Pro one, and then they had the X100, and that was they had one with lenses that are interchangeable, and then they had the fixed lens. The X100 is like a cult phenomenon now. Like it's the only camera we have in the house that I'm not allowed to touch that Naomi has. You know, that's like people fall in love with this camera. They came out with the XE1, which sort of was the precursor to the E series, the XT series, the XE series, all these different series. And when they came out with that, they were like, can we send you this camera to test and use? And Fujifilm was great. Like that was what they did in the beginning. They put the camera in people's hands. And at the time they had 5 or 6 lenses. They sent me all the lenses. They didn't even have a wide angle. And at the beginning, it was a mirrorless camera, and nobody had mirrorless cameras like this, not APS-C or full frame. And I just started using it. I put it next to what I was shooting at that point would have been like a D800, not even the 800, 810. It was like an
Yeah,
800.
yeah,
And I started putting it side by side and just taking the same photos all over Europe, all over Asia, and doing side by side comparisons. And I didn't have any expectations at that point. But when I started looking at it and processing the images, I was kind of blown away by their color, by the sharpness, by everything. I'm like, I think this is the future. This small light camera, this thing that I can travel with rather than this cumbersome beast. And I just started using it, and I went to speak at Photo Plus Expo, and I met the marketing and GM for Fujifilm North America, and he invited me to Japan to meet the team. And this was before, it was like 2013. It's 2013 and late 13 or early 14, I forget. And I met the whole team, and everybody was so nice. And at that point, it was just 5 or 6 people, and digital cameras wasn't designed. Of course, they would like for it to make money, but it was designed as a passion project for Fujifilm, for their legacy projects.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to build these cameras and lenses, and they have 40 to 60 years of experience with lenses and cameras. But this was their first digital camera division. And they were so nice and just so welcoming and just so passionate about what they were doing that I just couldn't help but like them, and couldn't help. We just became friends, like natural friends. And I
Wow.
just started communicating with them. And I remember at the time I was kind of looking at ambassadorships for cameras, and I was thinking, I'd always thought in the beginning, I was like, I'd really like to work with Nikon cameras. And I think it was kind of like a turning point for me, where I was starting to use this small mirrorless camera, and of course it was APS-C, and at that point everybody, Canon, Nikon, everybody was like, full frame is professional, APS-C is amateur. And I didn't necessarily agree with that, but I remember somebody or some people telling me, I can't remember if it was an individual, but the consensus was, you can't do the level of work that you do with that camera. And I think that made me really mad. And almost as a personal challenge, I kind of just decided to do it. And I started publishing photos with just that. And then the XT series came out. I think I just started working so much with them and watching Fujifilm grow that I kind of decided it was one part intuition. You know, I was like, I think this is going to be really important. I think mirrorless is going to be important in the future. And I believe in this team of people. And at that point, it wasn't, I didn't care about the ex photographer or any of those things. I just love these people, love what they do, and believe in them. And that's why I just wanted to stick with them. And it was kind of like a long game. Like, I think they're gonna crush everybody in a series of years. And I remember learning 2 years before the medium format came out that they were skipping full frame and going right to medium format. And at that point, I'm like, this is gonna change the game. You know, if you have like a $3,000-$4,000 medium format camera that can compete with a $40,000 Hasselblad camera, and this is a true game changer. And so it has just evolved and changed and changed. So I knew them when they were just the core team, and now there's so many people in the division all over the world. And you know, I'm happy to have most of them as personal friends, and just it's like a natural family kind of thing that I like.
Yeah,
And
that's what
and
I
you have to
was trying to
remember,
say.
yeah, and I don't really, obviously business stuff is important, but it's more about a feeling with me. I don't just take on partnerships that I do, you know, because they're either paying me or they, you know, they want to work together. Usually what I'll do if somebody says, can you try this? Can you use this? I'll say, yeah, I mean, I need to use it, but I'm not going to work with it unless it's something that I'm actually going to use. Because if it doesn't belong in the bag or it's not in my actual toolkit, then I just really don't care, you know. And I'm sure after the whole Canon situation, you know, when we took them to court in Europe, I'm pretty sure Canon's not going to be knocking on my door. But it's really at that point with the camera system at this point, there's really no amount of money or technology that could make me change cameras, but I would be willing to use them for certain things, like the new Sony for video. I mean, that's just incredible if you look at those specs. I mean, that's amazing what they're doing. Certain cameras for wildlife photography, because they're fast and there's unlimited buffer. I mean, there are certain things. It's not like I'm exclusively using a camera system because I'm an ambassador, but it serves most of my needs. But as somebody who is in production, we have to be able to use it. So any contracts that I sign are never exclusivity contracts. And that's prevented me from working with a lot of companies too, is I won't be exclusive, because as a professional and an educator, it's not my job to tell you this is the best camera. It's my job to say this is what worked for me. And it's not about, you know, Sony ambassadors. I have not trashing them or anything, but they're always like, this is the best camera Sony's ever made. This is the best, you know, it's like every camera's the best camera Sony ever made, you know? And I don't want to be that kind of person. It has to be from the heart and has to be true. That being said, you know, it's good when people support you too, but your motivation can't just be, you know, status or money or things like that. Because honestly, it's silly to do that, because it's not genuine to people or the audience or the community, but also it doesn't pay that much. So it's really, if you think it does, it doesn't. But that's sort of the reason for Fujifilm.
Yeah.
And honestly, the GFX 100 is so cool. Like, I love. I mean, it's heavy as
best
hell,
camera
you
in the
know.
world, right?
I wouldn't say it's the best camera in the world. It's just, I think the more I use it, the more I like it.
Yeah.
And you know, but I also like the in-body stabilization. And you know, right now it's funny because I worked with the GFX 100 for moments in time in December. All of December we filmed, and at the same time I had bought the camera and arrived in January, because they're made in limited supply. And that's one of the nice things, is that we'll put one aside for me so that I can buy it. But after that happened, in February, I canceled my entire year because of COVID-19. So I've been taking some photos locally. I'm in Florida, so it's a lot of pylons and things like that. It's funny, but I have so many 100 megapixel baby photos that it's incredible.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, I totally understand now. Yeah, I totally understand why the Fujifilm. It's a family. As you said, it's like a family, and it's a great camera overall. And I wish you very well being with the Fuji family. But again, I really appreciate that you're saying that even if as ambassador, it's not your place to say this is the best camera in the world, but actually educate people what is best for you, which is also, you know, for example, there is no. I think, in my opinion, there is no best camera in the world, because except Canon R5. I was joking, but anyway, no, it's true. It's true. It's the best camera for you. That's what's most important.
Yeah, individual workflows are going to vary,
Yeah.
and that's really what it comes down to. And I know that's frustrating when you're starting, because when you're starting, you really want somebody to say it's this camera, this lens, this software. But that's going to change for you too, because you have to experiment with a lot. So I can understand how people want to read that, but anything that you want to get good at only requires time. And that's what you have to understand with photography. It's not something that you ever master or ever fully understand. It's something that whether you've been doing it for 3 minutes or 30
Yeah.
years, every photographer in the world has the same thing in common, is that they want to get better at photography.
Yeah.
So that's
Exactly.
just, that's something too with the gear. That's going to evolve. That's going to change. The only constant is going to be you're going to cringe every time you click the buy button on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So let's move to a second question, and the last one from the audience and from me as well, from Marco Milo. I would read the question, but I think I will a little bit rephrase it because you will understand now. Where did you learn time blending, compositing, editing? But I want to rephrase it. Did you learn it or did you invent it? If you know what I mean. The specifically time blending, he asking about the time blending. I think he meant about the process of shooting and the process of editing, not just any of your photo, but especially time blending. So did you learn it or did you invent it? Or, and if you learn it, where did you learn it? Where did
I
you? Where did
didn't learn it. I may have been, again, one of the first people who was doing it, at least in a heavy public scene, not selling it, sharing it on social media. So I invented it. There was at the time there, and there still are artists that do like a temporal blending, and that's when you have one side of the panorama's night, and then
Yeah,
panels
yeah,
that go
yeah,
from
yeah,
night to day. And there's an amazing photographer in the United States that does these super high resolution. I forget his name. He's so good, but he's done like Obama's inauguration where he's got, you know, beginning, middle, and end of it, and all the different lighting and everything. And he spends months on these photos. So it existed. I didn't know about him before I started, but I knew about temporal blending. And it really came down to the way that I invented it was as utility to help myself create better images. Because what would happen is during the blue hour, if I was shooting blue hour, I'd keep moving the camera. And then when I'd get back into image review, into Lightroom, I'd look at, say, this image. I'm like, I love this composition, but I wish it was this time of day.
yeah,
And it decided and forced me very early into settling for something and then waiting through the light, not making any changes once I lock into the composition that I like. And from there, it was just kind of a natural thing to say, hey, I'm in Venice and I'm shooting on the Grand Canal, and scene looks great, sunset looks great, but could I add the lights in for the buildings? And could I get the gondole in a perfect line, and
yeah,
make sure there's nobody with, doing iPad selfies? And so it became a utility, as far back as 2011, 2012. And then I think after I started using it for a while, I recognized the power of it. And that's how sort of evolved into an astrophotography blend or a time blend, that it turned into that. But at
yeah,
first it was just so that I could capture every moment in time and figure out which second was the best. And then it was the idea of combining different things and then honing the amount of time that you can blend to in order to not break realism. So it was an invention, and then it became a technique that I loved so much that I refined, and I've continued to refine it and refine it over the years to make it
yeah.
almost one click. It's getting to the point where I've found so many shortcuts that it just gets easier and easier. So that's a good example too, where it's really not that complicated. It doesn't require too much heavy masking or anything. It's just a little bit of creativity it requires, and a little bit of
Absolutely.
patience.
Yeah, totally understand. That's. I hope the markers get his answer. And I thought, yeah, and for me personally, I think I never see that particular technique. I mean, there is AGR, there is the one which you mentioned, which I never heard about, and somebody actually telling that is Stephen Wilkins. Is that the guy who's you're talking about? Stephen
That's
Wilkins?
one of them. Yeah, that's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I thought you was the actual, I would say, inventor or a person who first do that in a whole sense, in a whole package, and teach about that. So for me, it was that's why I rephrased the question a little bit, because I think it's not where you learn it, but maybe when you invented it. And yeah,
Yeah, and I'm
yeah.
sure other
So
people have been using the technique for a long time, but it sort of happened. It was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And so it wasn't like I'm going to do time blending. It was an evolution of, hey, this
Yeah,
is cool.
yeah,
Like we can start doing this and to create this kind of imagery. And then it became more of a procedure. Then I was like, okay, now I'm going to make sure that everything's shot at the same f-stop, or, I'm thinking about the blending process and what elements and camera settings I'm going to need. But at first it was just, uh, and there's a last story I'll tell. It's a very funny story. Is I'd sit there with the camera and either in with a cable release so I don't vibrate the camera when I touch it on the tripod, or a 2-second timer, those ways that we all use. And I do that. I just sit in the location and every minute I press the button, or every minute I press the button. And then when I started working with Lee and Patrick at F-Stoppers and we started filming the first Photographing the World, I remember the first time I did that to teach time blending, and I'm like, okay, and I'm explaining it on camera, and now we just have to, every minute we'll go ahead and take a shot and take a shot. And then Lee's like, so you're taking a shot every minute? And I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, and you have to press the button to do that. I'm like, yeah, you sort of do. He's like, why don't you just put the camera in interval timer mode? And I'm like,
okay.
and I was like, because then it'll make me feel like I'm not important.
Yeah.
And he's like,
That's
yeah,
right.
but you're wasting all this time pressing the button when you could be doing something else. And
Yeah,
I was like, okay, fine. From there on, I was like, you're right. If I don't have to do anything, I just set it. So I'll set a camera up, set another camera up, automate them, and then just sit and relax. And
yeah,
the bags that we have these days, like Think Tank, I'm using the Mindshift backlight series, and I think it's the 45 Elite, the 45L Elite, which is like this huge camera backpack, but it's ergonomic. It's made just specifically for hiking, and I love it. But what's great about it is it fits an entire array of gear and up to 2 bottles of wine. So if you get everything set up, then you can just sit back and kind of enjoy the location.
yeah. We actually coming to the. By the way, did you know that we have a limit of 1 hour? Because after that, the Instagram is switching off the live. Did you know about?
Oh,
Yeah, this is crazy. We're already talking for an hour. We have like 3 minutes. So I would love to talk to you for another 1 hour, 2 hours. But I know you're holding your phone with your hands, and you're probably tired, and you get your a lot of things to do. But before we go, I want to say thank you so much for those wonderful answers, and for your wonderful answers, and for joining me for this live interview series. And as a tradition, I want to welcome everybody who's participating as a guest. Welcome to my country, and shoot in my country, in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Baikal Lake, Kamchatka, or any other places you heard of or never heard of in Russia. And I would love to see all of you guys, my guests, or every other photographers in my country to shoot and to produce much better images than maybe we do as a Russian photographers, or and promote not promote our country, but anyway, visit our beautiful country and experience our hospitality. I welcome you to my country as well. When everything is settled down with all in the world. And again, thank you so much for your answers, and for participating in my small series of 5 question with. Thank you, Elia.
cool. Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.